The rumble of the engine reverberates through the cab, drowning out the faint crackle of the radio as I navigate the desolate stretch of highway. It's past midnight, and the darkness outside presses in like a physical weight, punctuated only by the occasional flicker of a distant streetlight. I've been on the road for hours, the monotony broken only by the occasional blip on the radar indicating another vehicle passing in the opposite direction. But even the fleeting companionship of those passing headlights does little to dispel the sense of isolation that hangs heavy in the air. I've been a trucker for the better part of 2 decades now, hauling everything from fresh produce to industrial equipment across state lines. It's a solitary existence, but one I've grown accustomed to over the years. There's a certain freedom in the open road, a sense of independence that keeps me coming back for more, despite the long hours and countless miles. But tonight feels different somehow. Maybe it's the way the shadows seem to creep closer, stretching out like grasping fingers across the asphalt. Or perhaps it's the eerie silence that hangs over the landscape like a shroud, broken only by the steady thrum of the engine. Whatever it is, I can't shake the feeling of unease that gnaws at the edges of my consciousness, a primal instinct warning me of unseen dangers lurking just beyond the reach of my headlights. As the miles stretch on, my eyelids grow heavy, the rhythmic hum of the engine lulling me into a false sense of security. But just as I begin to drift off into sleep, something catches my eye. A flicker of movement on the side of the road. I jerk awake, heart pounding in my chest as I scan the darkness outside. For a moment, there's nothing but the empty expanse of highway stretching out before me. But then I see it. A figure standing just off the shoulder, its silhouette barely discernible against the inky blackness. My foot instinctively eases off the gas as I approach, heart hammering in my chest. The figure stands perfectly still, its features obscured by the darkness, but there's something about the way it stands, rigid and unmoving, that sends a shiver down my spine. I tell myself it's just a hitchhiker, or maybe a lost traveler in need of assistance, but deep down I know there's something off about this encounter. As I draw nearer, the figure disappears into the darkness, leaving me alone once more. I breathe a sigh of relief, chalking it up to my overactive imagination. But then, just as quickly as it had vanished, the figure reappears, this time closer, standing directly in the middle of the road. I slam on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt just inches from where it stands. My heart pounds in my chest as I stare ahead, adrenaline coursing through my veins. And then slowly the figure turns to face me, revealing a twisted, skeletal visage that sends a chill down my spine. With a guttural moan, it reaches out towards me, and in that moment I know, whatever this thing is, it's not human. With a scream, I throw the truck into reverse, tires screeching as I peel away from the nightmare in my rearview mirror. As I speed away into the night, the image of that grotesque figure burns itself into my mind, a haunting reminder of the terrors that lurk in the darkness. And though I may never understand what I saw that night, one thing's for certain. I'll never be able to shake the feeling that something out there is watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The night stretched out as I guided my truck down the desolate highway. It was a routine haul, just another long stretch of road to cover before I could finally rest my tired eyes. The monotony was only broken by the occasional flicker of a distant streetlight or the low hum of my engine. But as I rounded a bend, my tired gaze caught something unexpected. A lone figure standing by the side of the road, thumb outstretched in the universal gesture of a hitchhiker. My instincts warred with my sense of duty as I approached, the beam of my headlights casting long shadows across the figure's face. They were nondescript, wrapped in a heavy coat that seemed out of place in the mild night air. Still, something about their presence sent a shiver down my spine, a nagging sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. But I pushed aside my apprehension, rolling down the window to offer them a ride. The figure climbed into the cab without a word, settling into the passenger seat beside me. As we drove on, conversation was sparse, the silence thick with tension. I stole glances at my passenger, trying to gauge their intentions, but their features remained hidden in the shadows. It was as if they were a ghost, haunting the confines of my truck with their silent presence. As we neared our destination, my unease only grew, a knot tightening in the pit of my stomach. I could feel their eyes on me, boring into my soul with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. And then, without warning, they spoke. A voice like gravel, rough and cold. "You shouldn't have picked me up," they said, their words sending a shiver down my spine. I tried to brush it off, to pass it off as a harmless comment, but deep down, I knew there was something terribly wrong. I glanced over at my passenger, only to find them staring at me with eyes that seemed to pierce straight through to my core. And then, in the blink of an eye, they lunged toward me with a primal ferocity, their movements swift and relentless. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt as I fought to fend off my assailant. But it was no use. The figure was too strong, their grip like iron as they pinned me against the steering wheel. Panic surged through my veins as I struggled to break free, but it was futile. In the end, I was no match for whatever malevolent force had taken control of my passenger, and as I felt its icy grip tighten around my throat, dragging me into the darkness, I realized that some encounters are best left unexplored. The road stretched out before me, a never-ending expanse of darkness and uncertainty. But as I faded into unconsciousness, I knew that my journey was far from over. The cool night was thick with darkness as I guided my trusty truck down the lonesome stretch of highway, the only companion being the steady rhythm of the engine and the occasional flicker of distant streetlights. It was a life I'd grown accustomed to, one filled with endless miles of open road and the quiet solitude of the long-haul trucker. But tonight felt different, a subtle unease lingering in the air like a thick fog. Perhaps it was the way the shadows seemed to dance just beyond the reach of my headlights, or the eerie silence that blanketed the landscape like a heavy quilt. Whatever it was, it sent a shiver down my spine, a primal instinct warning me of unseen dangers lurking just beyond the edge of the road. I'd been on the road for hours, the monotony broken only by the occasional blip on the radar, indicating another vehicle passing in the opposite direction. But as I rounded a bend in the road, my tired eyes caught sight of something unexpected, a figure standing on the side of the highway, their form barely discernible in the darkness. My foot instinctively eased off the gas as I approached, heart pounding in my chest as I debated whether to stop or keep driving. In the end, the nagging sense of empathy won out, and I pulled over to offer the stranded traveler a ride. They climbed into the cab with a grateful smile, introducing themselves as Sarah and explaining that their car had broken down miles back. Conversation flowed easily between us as we continued down the highway, swapping stories and sharing laughs to pass the time. Sarah seemed like a kind soul, her easygoing demeanor putting me at ease despite the lingering sense of unease that still gnawed at the back of my mind. But as the miles stretched on, I began to notice something off about Sarah. Small inconsistencies in her stories, subtle shifts in her behavior that set my nerves on edge. It was nothing I could put my finger on at first, just a gut feeling that something wasn't quite right. But as we neared a deserted stretch of road, Sarah's demeanor shifted, her once friendly expression turning cold and calculating. Before I could react, she lunged towards me with a ferocity that caught me off guard, hands clawing at my throat with a strength that belied her slender frame. Panic surged through me as I fought to break free, the truck swerving dangerously as I struggled to maintain control. In a desperate bid for survival, I reached for the emergency brake, sending the truck careening off the road and into the darkness beyond. The impact sent us both flying, the world spinning wildly around me as I struggled to regain my bearings. When I finally stumbled out into the night, gasping for breath and clutching at my throbbing throat, Sarah was nowhere to be found. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but the eerie silence of the empty highway. As I stood there, shaken but alive, I realized that Sarah was never just a stranded traveler. She was something far more sinister, a predator lurking in the darkness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And though I may never understand what drove her to attack me that night, one thing's for certain, I'll never be able to shake the feeling of dread that washes over me every time I think back on our chance encounter on that lonesome stretch of highway.